So just recently they had the D&D live event where celebrities play D&D. But one of the issues I had when I was watching this is that the celebrities for the most part were new to the game, which in my opinion was detrimental to the viewing experience. You can't expect a bunch of comedians who've never played the game before and expect them to be good at both playing the game in an interesting way and also bringing comedic value to that game. Sure, you might get a small amount of laughs, but you can't focus on role-playing and the interesting game choices when you're too busy learning the game. Let's look at TV, for example. The first few episodes are usually pretty shaky because the characters don't really know what they want to be yet. They haven't been fleshed out. Later, it gets better, and it's the characters that we latch onto because the story's constantly changing. This works best for comedy because the characters are so central to what's funny about the shows. In The Office, it's the characters who we know so well, situations that are funny. Characters' personalities can sometimes be funny, but this is normally a one-off trope that is only good for like one joke. When Michael burns his foot on a George Foreman grill, the writers are taking a look at how they can push his need for attention to the farthest. References are another example. Throwing a reference like Star Wars into a show isn't inherently funny. It's the situation of that reference that makes it amusing. Like in The Simpsons, when Mark Hamill comes out during a convention and starts talking about how you can save money by switching to Sprint, that's funny. One-off D&D sessions often fail to reach the same depth as a campaign because the campaign hasn't found its footing, nor the characters' interactions have been solidified within a single session. Critical Role succeeds because it isn't just a bunch of randos thrown together. They know each other and can push each other to get the best interactions out of their characters. Also, they know their DM. If you don't know what type of DM you're working with, you're like a blind man poking around with a stick, trying to find out where the cliff ledges are, what you can do, what the constraints are. Because once that goes away and you know what you're dealing with, you don't have to worry about towing the line when you're playing D&D, but you can play within those constraints and have fun within those constraints. Critical Role's cast knows D&D well enough. They aren't bogged down in trying to find out what their attack bonus is, but can focus on their characters, which are almost always in roleplay, which a lot of other shows fail to do. We don't care about the laughs a player has or the feelings they get, because it's the character we're invested in. In improv, you go over the improv games and practice scenes with different suggestions over and over because you don't know what suggestions you're going to get in the scene, but you can prepare by learning the constraints of that game, so when it comes time to perform, you've mastered that form and can therefore be as funny as you need to within the constraints of that game. One rule of improv is you don't want to go for cheap jokes. You want to establish a location and a character who already have relationships with one another to dive into these interesting and funny interactions. You don't cheat the audience with some fake ending like it was all a dream, because then if they were invested in those characters, then you've just ruined the entire thing for them. That's because in order to invoke interesting and funny interactions, you have to have solidified characters and all your viewers to be invested in your world. Once that happens, that's when Critical Role's cast, being voiced actors, really comes to shine when playing their characters to be real and interesting. But this never would have happened without the foundation of understanding the game. Look at Marvel. They spent almost a decade building up to Endgame. All their characters slowly unveiled as we grew to care about them. We saw Iron Man build his first suit, Steve Rogers go from this sickly boy to a heroically strong man, to the Avengers finally finding themselves as a team and bonding over the death of an agent, to S.H.I.E.L.D. taking over Hydra, and finally, once we've established all these characters, it now means something when we take half of them away. Thanos snaps half the life in the universe out of existence. And this makes the victory more meaningful for the heroes. Now, let's look at DC. They scrambled together Batman v Superman before Batman had even been introduced in his own movie. The Justice League similar thing happened. They were hastily put together without the characters really getting a full introduction like Marvel gave them. And unlike DC, because those characters were already solidified, they could just focus on having interesting interactions between those characters instead of just introducing them for half the movie. It's about establishing enough ground for a payoff and also making that payoff worth it. Few D&D shows do this like Critical Role. It's over 100 episodes now, and spoilers, we have mourned for the death of Mollymock, cheered whenever we see Pumat's soul return on the screen, and were invested when we watched the Mystery of Uk'otoa unveil, cried again when Yasha was under the control of Oban, and we were shocked when Ford threw his sword into the lava, and were relieved when the war ended. It takes skill not only to focus on your players and the players on the campaign, but everyone on the audience as well. And this is another way that Critical Role shines by encourages their community. Not every D&D game can be Critical Role, nor it should have to try to be, or should have to be. But when you put on a show, it better be worth our potentially 4-hour-long investment. Or even more if it's a full campaign, which to get those full fleshed out characters, it needs to be. It's not just about a bunch of celebrities coming together, making a few laughs. It's about the characters and their journey they got to go on. Thank you. This is Sean from No Deck Dungeon, signing off.